Hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm Paul Tatino. He's Matt Sitek. We're going to be here for the next hour to talk New York Giants football with you, possibly some NFC East stuff as well. Some news just broke a few moments ago, as well as anything else you might want to discuss about the National Football League. As always, if you don't catch the show live, catch it as part of our archive on the New York Giants Podcast Network, podcast platforms everywhere, of course, Apple and Giants.com. Everywhere you go, you can find our shows, and we certainly appreciate your support. That's how these shows continue to survive. Matt, our number is 201-939-4513, but before we get to that number and get some calls up on the board, I think it's important we do mention NFC East headline just came out a couple of minutes ago. Mike McCarthy is out with the Dallas Cowboys, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN. Now, look, I get it. This guy's won a lot of regular season games over his career. I've never been impressed with his postseason record, especially at home when they've been favorites. They've usually come up short. Bottom line is, Dallas did not make the playoffs this year, in a year that Jerry Jones and company were promising big things. And so now a change is going to be made.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the, Cowboys' aspirations for the season, I feel like those kind of, went away once Dak Prescott went down with his injury, just around the midpoint of the season. And that was after they had already, lost Micah Parsons for a month. They lost DeMarcus Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence got hurt against the Giants in week 4. He never took the field again. So you're talking about two of your best defensive players, and also Deron Bland was hurt. Like, injuries really just derailed any chances the Cowboys had to really make a push towards the playoffs this season. But still, this news is pretty surprising. I mean, we knew, it had been widely reported that Mike McCarthy's contract with the Cowboys expired tomorrow. But it was, seemed to be the consensus that they would come to some sort of agreement before that tomorrow deadline, because just last week they turned down a request. I think it was the Bears wanted to request an interview with Mike McCarthy for their head coaching job, and the Cowboys denied it, which makes you think they are not letting him look at other openings that they plan on having him come back next year. Clearly that was not the case, and I feel like anytime the Cowboys are in the news we talk about this, and Jerry Jones has even talked about this, how he likes the Cowboys being in the news, whether it's good news or bad news. Any publicity is good publicity in Jerry Jones's eyes. And in my own humble personal opinion, it seems like he wanted the McCarthy negotiations to be one of the storylines of the NFL the week after the season, and now it kind of puts them in a bad position, because all the other teams that had head coach openings are at a minimum 1 week into their interview process.
Very true.
Some of the top coordinates kind of already have teams that they're at least leaning towards, that their reports are there's a lot of mutual interest. So the Cowboys are just sort of behind the 8 ball now, as they kind of, I'm not going to say scramble, but they're just late to the process. Mike Vrabel's already gone. There was another report that came out that said that Bill Belichick would have been interested in that Cowboys job had he known that it was going to be available. But now it seems like it's sort of too late on that ship. So I truly just don't know what the Cowboys did. They sort of mishandled this situation like they have with several other, negotiations over the last couple of years.
They finished 7-10 this year and out of the playoffs in third place, one spot ahead of the Giants in the division. So for a moment, let's kind of turn this back to the Giants. The Giants are staying the course with their guys. Dallas is now in an upheaval. I'm going to guess that with McCarthy leaving, probably not too many of those assistants are going to stay. They usually don't. So that's an issue. They desperately need a running back. I mean, it was so bad they re-signed Ezekiel Elliott. They brought him out of Grant's tomb to play for them last year. They were in such desperate shape. So they didn't give McCarthy any running game really to speak of, to try to play this past season with. So that's a team that's got cap problems and maybe a complete overhaul. Now, that can cause some shuffling in the division, certainly in terms of the cavern between them and the Giants. Unfortunately, Philadelphia and Washington both not only made the playoffs, they won their first-round games over the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. For those two teams in the NFC East, obviously great seasons. I mean, the Eagles, a lot of people expected them to be, a top team, considering how most of last season went. But the Commanders really turned things around, I'm not going to say out of nowhere, because there was a big reason why they turned it around, and that was that, the rookie quarterback they selected with the number 2 pick. But, yeah, the Cowboys clearly had expectations to, be right up there with the Eagles competing for the NFC East crown this year, and obviously fell well short of that. For Mike McCarthy, it seems like this is like, I just saw someone tweeted it a little while ago, but it's sort of like the coach's version of betting on himself. Because clearly it seems like Jerry Jones had expectations that they would be able to come to some sort of agreement to keep McCarthy under contract, at the very least for next season, even if it wasn't some long multi-year extension. And clearly McCarthy is going to take his chances and see if he can land one of these other head coach openings, which part of me thinks he must have some inclination that he's got at least a real shot at one of the jobs, because otherwise I don't know why you would leave, a sure thing in your current job unless you have some pretty strong confidence that you'll be able to land one of the other openings.
Well, with his overall record, his one-loss record, obviously in the regular season, is very, very good.
Yes.
So somebody is going to call him and give him an interview.
Yeah, there are two teams that reportedly have a lot of interest in him. The Bears, which is the team that wanted to interview him last week, and Dallas said no, and then the Saints. So I wouldn't surprise me if he ended up with either of those teams, especially Chicago, considering they faced him twice a year for, a decade when he was with the Packers?
Sure.
Saw what he can do as a head coach, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the direction Chicago ends up going if they're not able to land Ben Johnson, who seems to be their top choice.
The other 3 NFL openings are the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Raiders, just for the record, besides the 3 that he just mentioned, the 2 plus the Dallas one.
And New England obviously has already filled their
Mike Vrabel's on
opening.
TV right now doing his live press conference on NFL Network. So
Pearson can hardly contain his excitement.
I'm a Giants fan.
201-939-4513 is our phone number. Folks, just to kind of get you caught up on what's going on here in Giants land, even though earlier last week it was Coach Brian Dable who said he would take a few days, kind of sort things out, and had made no promises either way about what he was going to do with his staff. As we sit here this morning, there is still no announcement either way. Just so people understand, we still do not know if the Giants will or will not make any moves with their staff. So just want to make sure you guys have that out there. That's as we speak. Brian Dable hasn't said a word.
Yeah, there's been no official word of any sort of moves for the coaching staff at all. Over the weekend, there have just been some, reports out there from various reporters from different outlets.
But no teams have confirmed any of those.
Yeah, I mean, especially with, because one of the big buzz or rumors, which was pure speculation, was that wherever Mike Vrabel would go, that he would want to bring Shane Bowen with him, because they obviously spent 4 years together in Tennessee, and Bowen was his defensive coordinator for all 4 seasons. Mike Vrabel, as we just said, is literally being introduced as the Patriots head coach right now or a few minutes ago. So clearly he's not making any official moves on his staff until he's officially the coach, which is now the case. But
let him have dinner first.
But regardless, there were reports anyway in the last 24 hours or so that it makes it sound like that is not going to happen, of Bowen just following Vrabel to New England. Obviously, things can change. We don't know for sure by any means, but at least as of now, it seems like no big changes on the coaching staff yet, at least.
Okay, let's go to the phones and hear what you guys have to say. Line 2, James in Georgia is first up on the program. Hello.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Good morning.
Good morning. So I just got a couple of questions, like free agency. How do y'all think? Well, it's kind of a two-parter. Like, what do you think is the best money route to do a rebuild this year? and then I have a draft question, which kind of would tie in. But would you spend your money like on a high dollar O lineman and mid-range quarterback, or would you go for the high dollar quarterback and try to fill in where you can after that? And do you think that somebody like Trey Smith or T. Higgins or Sam Darnold are some of those high-end ticket guys? Can we afford one of those guys, or are some of those guys out of our range?
All right, let's take this one step at a time. Joe Shane and Brian Dable are still in their evaluation process right now, figuring out what it is that they are going to want to add. So it's a little early. But having said that, we know free agency comes up first in March before the draft. Joe Shane has said the Giants are in pretty good shape with the cap. They've got a bit over $40 million to spend. Okay, that's what we know. Those are the facts. If it were me, and again, I have absolutely no idea what those conversations are like upstairs. But if it were me, I would not spend any money on a big ticket item. I would be more concerned in getting some medium price guys and spreading it out and getting as many quality players as I could in here without necessarily overspending on any one position, because that will suck up a bunch of your cap in a heartbeat. And then before you know it, you're not going to have enough to fill in all the other gaps and, of course, the depth that the Giants need to get.
Yeah, just in terms of, some of the players that you mentioned, I don't think that Sam Darnold is going to be a realistic option for the Giants in free agency. First of all, I don't think Minnesota's going to let him leave. I think at the very least they will franchise tag him.
Tonight's game might have a lot to do with that.
Yeah, if the Vikings win tonight, I don't think there's any chance that Sam Darnold leaves Minnesota after this season.
I really don't want Sam Darnold per se. I just who else is more than likely going to be available, because we need camp bodies at quarterback. If anything else.
For sure, but Sam Darnold, of all the quarterbacks that are, set or even rumored to potentially hit free agency this offseason, Sam Darnold's definitely going to get the biggest contract. But again, that's going to be from Minnesota, I think, one way or the other, franchise tag or a long-term deal. The other guys who, could get a decent amount of money, starting quarterback money, are guys that, at least as of right now, are not for certain going to be free agents. Like if Derek Carr gets let go by the Saints, my guess would be he'd be the quarterback that gets the next biggest contract after Sam Darnold. But
I concur.
But there's a good chance that the Saints just keep Derek Carr, and so then he wouldn't even be an option. Aaron Rodgers, if he doesn't retire, he could get a decent 1-year deal, or maybe 2 years, but short-term deal, but for a decent amount of money. Like outside of those guys, none of the quarterbacks that are going to be available, I don't think any of them are going to garner that big of a deal. The one that I think maybe would have is Kirk Cousins, but as we've spoken about, he's got that offset language in his contract where if he gets let go by the Falcons, whatever team he signs with next year, it's going to be for the minimum, because the Falcons are going to owe him so much money.
Right. I think the only other guy who may approach the top or the upper tier in the free agent contract monies for quarterbacks, and only because he's still very young, and there are probably still a bunch of teams out there who thought that Justin Fields would be really worth a high draft choice. He might wind up, if just two teams think that he could be their next guy, they'll bid against each other and drive his price maybe a little higher. He might be the only guy on the second level.
Yeah, I think, at least as of right now, a lot can change, but my guess would be that Justin Fields would sign somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15
I would think so.
Season.
I would think so.
That would be my best guess.
Again, unless there's a bidding war between two teams that really want him.
That's true. And the only other quarterback, again, who right now is under contract, so that his team would have to let him go, but Geno Smith, if he were to somehow become a free agent, because there's at least some speculation that Seattle might choose to move on, that could be another guy that would, enter that, Derek Carr type range.
He gets some good money.
Yeah,
he's
he's
had 3 good years.
But again, these are guys that, at least as of right now, are still under contract and are not set to be free agents. So we don't know for sure if they will, even be a potential option for the Giants.
You see, James, that's why, if you're trying to plan out your budget and you're the Giants, you've got to first make that decision. You're right. Are you going to go after a big-ticket item at any one spot? I would not do it.
Yeah, I agree. The only position I would consider it would be cornerback. If you wanted to go out and sign one of the top cornerbacks, which
that would be really pricey.
Which there's only 2. Well, the thing is, the 2 top guys, at least as of now, that are set to be free agents would be DJ Reed from the Jets and then Charvarius Ward from San Francisco.
Isn't Reed? He's a player option, right? He's got an opt-out.
I think so, but
he's not unrestricted.
But I believe everyone expects him to opt out.
Yeah,
he's a free agent.
Yeah, he would be an opt-out guy. He can void his deal.
Yeah,
and so can Charvarius Ward from the Niners.
Yes, just from what I've seen, like those 2 guys for most media outlets' free agent rankings, those would be the top 2 corners. I guess if any position, could potentially see the Giants spending a little bit more at for a free agent, it would maybe be one of those 2 guys. But at the same time, with where the Giants are drafting, if the Giants don't think they'll be able to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks with the number 3 pick, then all of a sudden, Travis Hunter would definitely at least be in the conversation.
He'd be sweet.
And
Will Johnson's going to be staring him in the face too.
Yeah, and obviously Will Johnson is a pure corner, and Travis Hunter, at the very least, I would think would play at least some of the time at cornerback as well. So that, I guess, would be the argument against spending top dollar for a corner. But I'm with you. I don't foresee the Giants spending at the very, very top of the market. The Giants do have cap space to spend. Joe said a little bit over 40, according to websites like Spot Track and Over the Cap. That number could even be north of 50 by the time the new league year begins.
You know what I mean, Matt? They need bodies. It's
for sure.
Just getting one big ticket item is not going to put them over the top. They need bodies.
That's why I've seen a lot of fans on Twitter say that they want the Giants to sign Trey Smith, who is obviously a very talented guard, but he's going to be very pricey because he's probably going to be the top offensive lineman of any offensive line position to hit free agency. But B, and we talked about this last week, the first 6 weeks of the season when the Giants had a healthy offensive line, I'm not going to say the offensive line was, a top 5 or top 10 line, but it was playing well enough. They were middle of the pack, and that was with Greg Van Roten having come late from signing during training camp and throwing him right into the mix. Personally, I think maybe just re-sign Greg Van Roten and then maybe target another interior lineman or a tackle sometime on day 2 of the draft as sort of like a developmental piece.
That's how I see it.
Add some depth to the offensive line. I don't think the Giants need to go out and sign the top guard to boost the offensive line, because prior to Andrew Thomas's injury, the offensive line was not the reason the Giants weren't winning games in the first part of the season. Right. It was playing well enough. And just sort of similarly with T. Higgins, I just think T. Higgins is going to, whether it's with Cincinnati or another team, he's just going to go for way more money than the Giants.
He sure is getting money.
Can and should be paying someone, because Malik Neighbors is the team's number 1 wide receiver now.
I want to go back to what John Mara said when he spoke to the media and said that there were 3 priorities. Got to get the quarterback situation squared away, and he was very clear. It could be veteran free agent, it could be trade, or it could be draft.
It could be all of them.
He was not excluding a trade or a veteran free agent. He was not. And I know there's so many people out there, although it seems like the music is starting to get softer for those people who are demanding a quarterback at pick 3. I think we've talked those people off the ledge. We've certainly done it enough on this program. Myself, Matt, John, we've tried to talk you down off that ledge. You don't have to take a quarterback at number 3. And maybe it was John's words that kind of made people reevaluate how you get the quarterback. Now, we all think, the three of us think you get the bridge quarterback in free agency and you worry about the developmental quarterback later. I will say this, although John, I think, has said he wouldn't be adverse to taking a QB at 3, but he wouldn't take him to be the starter. Is that where you are?
Yeah, I said if the Giants were to draft a quarterback at 3, my dream would be for that guy to basically redshirt all of this upcoming season.
See, I'm not even taking a quarterback at 3. But anyway, having said that, this is why you've got to be very careful, though, in terms of how much money you spend on a quarterback, because if you're looking for a bridge, and John was saying that there's different kinds of bridges, right? The Golden Gate, the Gothels, the Bayonne Bridge. I get all that. That's going to determine the level that you're going to spend on that veteran free agent. And we've already told you the top of the line guys who are going to be the most pricey, Giants are going to be looking for those guys. They're not. They're just not. They're going to be looking for a moderately priced bridge quarterback, and that's why I keep pushing Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, having said that, okay, John Mara was clear. His number 2 priority, and you were there too, you heard him say it. He said defense.
Oh, yeah.
Defense was his second priority. So if he's gone quarterback first and defense second, and we don't think they're going to overspend on a quarterback, chances are if they do spend a little bit more than moderate money, my guess is it'll be on a defensive player, potentially a defensive tackle.
Certainly possible.
Because defensive tackles, even on the higher scale, are cheaper than higher scale corners.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I'm trying to be logical about this, folks, because we haven't talked to the people upstairs. They're not telling us.
No,
okay?
They don't shed light on this.
I'm just trying to play this out. Like, the math makes more sense. You can sign a quality defensive tackle for less than you can sign a quality corner.
Yes,
okay?
That is for sure.
So, now, there's also the other part that comes into play, that it is a good defensive tackle draft. So you've got to weigh that too.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, between the number 3 pick, which if the Giants were to consider a defensive line move, the number 3 pick,
Graham will be sitting there.
There's only one interior guy at least, and that's Mason Graham.
And man, is he good.
As you just mentioned, it is considered to be a strong defensive tackle draft, which means pick number 34, you can still get a very talented defensive tackle who could pretty much step in almost immediately and be, a starter or at least play significant snaps next to Dexter Lawrence with that 34th pick. So,
having said that, though, there's nothing wrong with even taking one later on, because if you just beef up your defensive line, that's not a bad thing either.
Oh, for sure. But my point just being, between the cap space the Giants have for free agency and then the draft picks, and I would say day 1 and day 2 picks, I would expect a minimum of 1 defensive tackle added, either with a somewhat significant chunk of cap space money or a day 1 or day 2 pick.
Okay, now go back to John Mara's list. Again, I'm trying to logically read what was said. What evidence do we have before us? Back to his list. Third thing on his list, and it was the final thing on his list, was offensive line depth. He did not say starters. He was very clear in his quote, and if you went back to his transcript, if you want to pull it up, he said offensive line depth. Okay? That says to me that you are not going to bring in a big-ticket offensive lineman. You'll bring in somebody, but you're not going to bring in a pricey guy. That's the hint that I'm reading off of the quote.
Yeah, well, to me, I just think the biggest thing is, of course, that has to be a priority, just given how the last 2 seasons have went. I mean, 2023, Andrew Thomas goes down that week 1 in the season opener, and then the first half of the season was a revolving door on the offensive line. Fast forward to this year, the first 6 games, the entire starting offensive line played every single snap together. Mm-hmm. And then Andrew Thomas gets hurt, and from week 7 on, once again, it's like a revolving door.
10 different combinations.
At every position seemed to be getting hurt. Guys were getting swapped and moved around. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense that Mr. Mara would say that offensive line depth is got to be a big priority.
Do you have the quote?
I'm trying to find.
Okay, while you look for that, all right, you keep looking for that. We'll get another caller up, and then I'll have Matt read that quote to you. Let's go back to Cliff in New York. You're next on the program. Hello.
Hey, guys. Chiming right in here, you were talking about what I was really interested in. Regarding the elite offensive linemen that we're supposedly not interested in, the trouble with those guys I've heard in the past when we've been talking at this time of the year is that when one of those guys becomes a free agent, the team that already has him tends to find a way to keep him.
That is very true in most cases, yes.
And it really doesn't even become available, right? So that's one thing. And then I was thinking a lot listening to the show last week with all the talk about the quarterback. I don't want to spend more than 10, 12, 15 million tops on a quarterback. I don't care who it is. And yes, I need to spread it around. I love the level-headed approach you're taking. But the reality check on the offensive line, I think, is central. I would love to know what Coach Brasillo thinks after working for a year with the young guys. Because the increase to the depth thing that John Mara mentioned, I would hope means this time around, it's great that we had Illuminor and Van Roten, but this time around maybe there's another one or two Runyons, just in terms of their price range, and their age, and that if we can get, I don't think it's realistic to think that in 2025 we're going to have the offensive line yet that can compete in the division with the Eagles and the Cowboys, no matter who the coach is. And I don't know much about Washington's OL.
Probably not consistently, let's put it that way. But at least if you can keep a functional line that's going to be able to at least get to the end of the race without having 10 different lineups, that's the key. Honestly, to be honest with you, Cliff, Matt already mentioned it. The line was clearly functional until guys started going down. So
right.
So what you need are either A, durability guys who are going to be able to hang in there and give you functional play, right? Or you have to upgrade your backups to where, hey, even though we're making all these changes, somehow these guys can blend in. To me, that's how you got to spend your money.
Exactly, and I think that when you get those that improved depth, I want younger guys that can last a little longer. Maybe Van Roten lasts 16, 17 years. He seems to be the kind of guy that could, but I would like to see more guys Runyon's age. And on the defense, I've been excited about a defensive tackle since we let Leonard Williams go, because the defense had flashes of days of yore when him and Dexter were doing their thing for just a couple of games there.
Yeah.
And I totally understood the trade. I understood everything. Yep. I wasn't angry that they let him go. But the problem with thinking about the DTs is we don't know if we're going to have a 4-man front or a 3-man front on the base defense yet.
Right.
And I have no idea what they think of Coach DC. What's his name? That was just floated as maybe Vrabel's new assistant.
Shane Bowen?
Shane Bowen?
Yeah, I mean,
no, we don't have any answers as to.
Fault? I mean, when he was doing
going
great,
forward, we don't know what's going on. I'll just say this, okay? I'll say one thing about that defensive front, and Cliff, this is simply a personal preference once again. I don't like when the defensive front has 2 defensive tackles down, and then Burns and Thibodeau are playing defensive ends with their hands in the dirt. To me, that is a counterproductive alignment, because Burns and Thibodeau are better if they're standing up. That makes better use of their skills. And if you go back and watch plays when both guys had their hands down and they were playing a 4-man front with those guys as in the dirt defensive ends, I don't think you're going to like that tape too much. And so that's part of what I would get rid of. Okay? If you want, have them standing up, have them standing up, okay? Or go to what was the Belichick Parcells 3-4 with 3 down linemen and the bookends of Taylor and Banks, where you had the 5-man front. Go to that. which, as you know, that whole front that was built by Parcells and Belichick, that front was meant to stop the run. And then you also had dominant pass rushers in George Martin and Leonard Marshall and Lawrence Taylor, who also could get to the quarterback. To me, every time that they put Burns and Thibodeau with their hands down and says, play defensive end in a four-man front, I'm wincing. That, to me, is something that I probably would reevaluate and get out of the playbook. I don't think that part of the scheme works very well, if you ask me. But that's just my opinion.
No, I'm totally with you. I think we have a real shot at coming much further on the defense this year, no matter how they handle Shane Bowen's future. I think we have a real shot because when Joe Shane gave his bye week presser, the thing he wanted everybody to know was that we had the youngest defense in the league.
Right.
And I thought, that was very telling, and we all were thrilled with the way the 24 draft helped on the defense. Just incredible. But they weren't the big dudes, you know. It's the trenches, you know. It's still a work in progress on both sides. But I think with the scheme questions, like you said, and a few more guys, I don't think the defense is very far away from being really something to handle. And I have no idea if Shane Bowen's experience at Tennessee had anything to do with developing young guys or if they were fairly well along by the time he started being the DC. And all that stuff they're going to figure out, and I know they know what they're doing, except...
well, his defenses weren't as young as this one. That I can tell you, Cliff.
It was not.
No, they were not as young as this one. Overall, this defense was very, very young. These guys were like little baby chicks all on the field. I mean, this was a young defense. Cliff, I got to run. I want to get the Matt's research here and get to another call. Be well. 201-939-4513. Okay, what'd you find in terms of the quote?
Yeah, so the quote, Mr. Mara saying, beyond quarterback, what are some of the other issues that you saw from the season? And he pointed out the defense. He said the defense didn't play well. When the defense doesn't play well, or when you have an offense that performs like that, you're putting more pressure on your defense, but we need to make improvements there. So he said, I think we need some more depth on the offensive line in addition to the defense, but made it clear the number one thing is the quarterback position.
Okay, so again, the term was depth when he talked about offensive line. He didn't say starters necessarily.
He said, I think we need some more depth in the offensive line.
Well, okay, so that's what I'm working off of. When I try to reason this thing out, I'm working off of that. I don't think that was a slip of the tongue. I think he meant what he said, and that's all we have to go off of. Did you have any thoughts about a defensive tackle, a free agent? Is that what you were looking up?
No, I was actually looking up because the first caller mentioned Trey Smith, which we agreed
pricey,
probably a little too pricey, but that just had me looking at who were some of the other guards that will be available in free agency, at least as of now. There's a solid crop of guards that are starting caliber guards that are set to hit free agency. And one name in particular that stands out to me is a familiar face around here, Kevin Zeitler.
35 years old?
He's 34. He's definitely on the older side, but I mean, we just brought Greg Van Roden in at 34 and played every single snap all season. So I don't know if necessarily the age would, cause the Giants to not have.
He's a one-position guy, though. He's strictly a right guard.
Yeah, that's fair. But
the thing about Van Roten, he's a left, he's a right, he's a center.
No, that's true.
He gives you more flexibility.
For sure. And
he'll be cheaper, too.
Definitely will be cheaper, but at the same time, Zeitler, I would say, probably outperformed Van Roten this year. Zeitler was amazing.
His whole career. He's outperformed him. He's a better player.
Yeah, that was just one name, but there's James Daniels from Pittsburgh, Tevin Jenkins from the Bears, more guys further and further. But in terms of defensive linemen, there is one player that stood out to me, and especially because he stood out when I was watching one of the games that was taking place yesterday, one of the playoff games, Milton Williams of the Eagles.
I was so high on him coming out of the draft. Liked him a lot.
He's been, this season, I mean, again, it's a contract year for him, but this season he really helped himself by having a strong 2024 campaign.
Got the most reps of his career this year.
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
and-
he's
and
probably
made it pay off.
he's probably been one of the biggest risers from like the beginning of the season to the end of the season in
I
terms
think
of the
he's going
free
to get
agent
some money,
rankings.
though.
No, he's definitely going to get some money,
He's
but
going to get some money.
I don't know if he necessarily is going to get. He's not going to get top of the market defensive tackle money.
No.
But he's definitely earned himself a solid payday. But
Yep.
again, the Giants are going to spend some money at some positions, whether it's even if it's not at top of the market prices. You do expect some starting caliber players to be added, and those guys still cost money as well. So,
Yeah. Liked Williams a lot. So and he was a disappointment his first few years in Philly.
for
He
sure.
also didn't play a lot, but when he played, he didn't seem to have much production. Again, one of those guys who we talk about, right? You wait 3 years, then you find out does something really bloom out of that guy? Williams started to bloom.
Exactly. I have another name
Go
for
ahead.
a potential guard. I want to get your opinion on it. Mekhi Becton, after the year he's had in Philadelphia.
He played well.
He did play well, playing under their offensive line coach, who is widely considered to be probably
what it is?
the best offensive line coach in the league.
There are a couple of scarlet letters that tend to hang with a guy throughout his career, and they're hard to get rid of. And those perceptions from outside become really hard to get rid of. Always had weight problems, okay, weight fluctuation, which led to injuries. And quite frankly, work habits used to be questioned with him. That was all stuff that we heard coming out of the combine. That's why you may not remember when I was with John at the combine originally, and I hadn't been in the interview process up at the table with Becton. It was like, wow, really, really impressed. And then you start digging in. And when I started digging in and finding out about the negatives on him, I was like, oh, no. Andrew Thomas is the safer pick. You get Andrew Thomas. Do not take Mekhi Becton. And with the Jets, those things all raise their ugly head.
Yeah.
Did not this year with Philly. So my question to you is going to be a comeback question. Does that scarlet letter, or do those scarlet letters erase themselves after 1 year in Philly? Or does that still leave a residue for you?
I don't think it erases it completely. I personally, with the Giants, would be a little hesitant because, say what you want, these guys are obviously all professionals, but I feel like because he, as you said, played with the Jets for, 4 years and did not live up to expectations at all, playing in MetLife Stadium, even if he were to come back and play for the other team in MetLife Stadium, I feel like that stadium alone might just sort of bring back some not great memories for him, and
There would be a lot of pressure on him.
potentially force him back into some old habits that he kind of fell under when he was with the Jets. It's honestly the same sort of reason why I'd be a little hesitant to bring Sam Darnold in. I mean, obviously he's coming off this great year with the Vikings, but we all know what happened with him playing in MetLife Stadium for a couple of years.
Well, Darnold and Becton, though, to me are in the same boat in that both guys want starters' money. They're coming in to start. If they go somewhere, they're going to be starters, and they want starters' money.
Yeah, I think Becton, with the season that he had, has earned some level of starting money.
So,
he's not going to get top
in
of the
a
market
way,
money. But,
doesn't that almost push him to the side a little bit anyway for what the Giants want?
well, I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants bring in a starting caliber guard. I mean, I know we mentioned Mr. Mara said offensive line depth, but who's to say that doesn't mean adding a starting caliber guard and then pushing one of the potential starters into more of a depth
I
reserve
think if
role?
you do that, though, you'll be more prudent to sign a guy with potential starting ability and then put incentives into it, as opposed to a guy like Becton, who's still young in his career, and he's going to say, no, I want to know where I go, I'm the starter, and I want some guaranteed money. I don't think his
that's
needs
fair.
are going to match yours. That's what I'm thinking.
That's fair. What about this guy then from, let me pull him up here, from the Colts, Will, I don't know if it's Will Fries or Will Freeze.
I thought it was Freeze.
Who's
I
coming
haven't-
off a broken leg
Yeah,
from
I haven't
early
watched
in the
enough
season.
of his tape to know what kind of quality he brings.
Me
to the
neither.
table.
I just see him pretty high up
Yeah.
on this list, and coming off an injury, even though he is still young, coming off a serious injury, maybe that's the sort of player that
Anyway,
would take some incentives.
all of these things we're discussing hypotheticals for a team X who would be in the Giants situation. Let's
Yes.
make that very clear. We are not discussing any of these pending free agents as Giants people as much as hypothetically Team X who might be in the Giants situation.
With
These would be
the
the kind
needs
of
that the
guys
Giants
that
have.
you would think
Yes.
about. Yes. Owen, on line 2 in Delaware. You're next on the show. Hello.
I just want to talk a little bit about the offensive line, which, I think a lot of people, mainly because of injuries, just don't really know what the state of the Giants' offensive line is. I get a lot of people talking and they say, well, how are we going to replace Evan Neal? Evan Neal's not a starter on this team, right? Jermaine Illuminor has played fantastic right tackle, in my opinion. I'm not a
No, he played well. He
whatever.
did. He played well.
But exactly. Now, I would be more than open to bringing someone like Mekhi Becton in. I think he'll probably hit free agency because, while the Eagles do have like $30 million or something to spend, they have a lot of young guys on the defense that are probably going to want deals, like Zach Bond and a couple other guys. Now, what I prefer is to spend that money on one of those corners that you guys mentioned. I think, our line really, before the injuries, played fine. I also think the defense played fine, contrary to what John Mara said to the press. But if we can get a corner one in here, I think it opens up what you do in the draft, because now at pick 3, assuming you're not picking a quarterback, you might not get swayed as much by a guy like Travis Hunter. You may, the guy I want is Mason Graham. I think, building up the D line is how the Giants have always won, their Super Bowls, So I want Mason Graham or Abdul Carter. I think they're really both great players. But I'm kind of just wondering to you guys where you would rank our best players with the other teams in the NFC East best players. Because between Neighbors, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, I think those guys are all top in their positions throughout the league. But it's kind of hard to tell on a team that, around them hasn't really, matched their level. So that's my question. Just love to hear what you guys think.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Owen.
Dexter Lawrence is all NFL. This is now 3 years in a row.
For the NFLPA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That he has gotten at least somebody's accolades as an all NFL player 3 years in a row.
And quite honestly,
So-
if he had played the full season, he would have been either a first or second team All Pro.
Right.
I mean, he had
So-
9 sacks in the
There's
10
no argument.
games he played.
No
I
argument
think.
there.
He would have been.
He's top.
He would have been an AP All Pro had he stayed healthy. Fortunately, he had that elbow injury that forced him to miss 5-6 games, so he didn't get AP honors. But yeah, in terms of defensive tackles, interior defensive linemen, I'm putting Dexter Lawrence right up there with Chris Jones. I mean, whoever
sure.
you want to call the top.
He's the best
the
DT
very
in
top
in
of the
division.
line throughout the entire NFL. Dexter Lawrence is in that
Yeah,
group.
best
for
DT
sure.
in the division for sure. That's unquestioned.
Yeah.
Neighbors is on amongst the higher level of wide receivers in the division, but right now, can we say he's as accomplished as A.J. Brown or Smith or McLaurin or CeeDee Lamb? He's a rookie. I think he's like sniffing that level, but I don't know that he's there yet.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think just because he was only a rookie this season, and if you look at the rest of the NFC East, I mean, as you mentioned, there's A.J. Brown, there's CeeDee Lamb, there's Terry McLaurin. Those are all veteran players that have been doing it for multiple years. I mean, McLaurin is the youngest, I believe, of that crew, and this is his, fifth season?
I don't even remember.
And he's been
now.
producing.
Seems like he's been around for a decade.
He's been producing very consistently every single season. So I would say in terms of number one receivers, I, for right now, would probably put Malik number 4 in the division behind those 3 guys, but only because he's coming off a rookie year. If Malik goes next year and takes another step in his game, a step up from what he did as a rookie, then easily you could be moving him, I don't know about all the way up on the list, but maybe a spot or two. Because again, A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb especially, I mean, those are just 2 of the very, very best wide receivers in the entire NFL.
Who was the other guy he mentioned?
Andrew Thomas, who, when healthy, Andrew Thomas is right up there among the top offensive tackles.
But durability has to count.
Yes, for sure. If Andrew Thomas did what he did in 2022 every year, we would be talking about Andrew Thomas as one of, if not the best left tackle in the league. However, as the saying goes, the best ability is availability.
Yeah.
If you're not available, that's a knock on you. Of course, Andrew Thomas, when healthy, is incredibly talented and would be right up there.
Oh, he'd be
potentially the number one tackle in the division.
No, he would be.
No,
I don't think I would.
Jordan Mailata is very, very good as well. And if we're talking tackles and not just left tackle, then
we're talking left tackle.
Okay, because Lane Johnson would certainly be in the conversation as well, even though he's old.
I think you have to talk specific positions.
We're talking just left tackle.
Andrew Thomas, hands down, if he's healthy.
If he's healthy, yes. And Mailata would be the only, I think, conversation.
I agree.
But again, Andrew Thomas has to stay healthy. I mean, even he said that when he spoke to the media last.
Those are the only 3 guys he asked about, so that's what we discussed.
Those are certainly the top 3 players right now.
I think Brian Burns, at his position, would have a heck of a conversation, too, to be frank with you. Brian Burns is a damn good player.
Oh, he is very, very talented this season.
First alternate to the Pro Bowl, which meant he was the 4th edge rusher in the NFC voting.
He might have been the most impressive, just all around, not just stats, but just performance, battling through adversity, battling through injuries. I think he was the most impressive player in my eyes from the Giants this past season. I will say, though, in terms of where he would rank in the division, it still would be behind Micah Parsons in my eyes. Micah Parsons is one of the best players in the entire NFL.
Nothing wrong with that.
But outside of him,
he's the only one.
Burns would be number 2.
I think he'd be number 2. As terms
Washington
of
and
outside
Philly,
linebacker / edge rusher.
Washington and Philly, they both have good, solid to good edge rushers, but they don't have someone, elite at the Micah Parsons level.
Right. And again, Burns, all-around player. Look at his 8 passes defense at the line of scrimmage. Tackles for losses. He plays the run. Okay, that when we start talking about that position, I'm always more impressed with guys. I get the pure pass rushers. I understand all of that. But the guys who play that position and can actually get it done all the way around in every aspect of the game, those guys are special. You don't get a ton of those guys in the league. A lot of your pass rushers are one-dimensional. Burns is not one-dimensional.
No, Burns could do it all. And going into next year, I am very, very excited to see this Giants defensive line perform, hopefully with everyone healthy, because that first half of the season before, Dexter Lawrence went down, which I'm talking about the period also where Kayvon went down, we had Aziz to fill in for him, but still the pass rush dealt with some injuries, and yet still for almost half the season, led the league in sacks. We're on like a record-setting pace for all-time sack leader. So if that pass rush unit, especially the Burns, Dexter, Kayvon trio, can stay healthy next year, the sky is the limit.
All right, real quick, Pearson, the Giants Huddle podcast. You guys don't want to miss it. Long-form interviews with Giants and NFL personnel. You can get it on all your favorite podcast platforms, as well as the Giants mobile app and Giants.com. Pearson, who we got this week?
Tomorrow we got David Syvertson.
From our lads.
And draft season's going up later today.
That's with Tony Pauline and our own John Schmelk. Yep. So, folks, plenty of Giants content. Stick around. We are going to be with you all during the offseason. And, of course, we're back tomorrow for another edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. From Outside Tech, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.